Okay, we'll get started. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, to our first annual Youth Advocacy Day. It's actually sponsored by Maine Young Democrats, Maine High School Democrats, and Maine College Democrats, but it's in an attempt to bring young people together through a bipartisan manner, because whether you're getting involved at the local level or at the state level, this is about making sure that young people have a voice and have a seat at the table, and that's exactly why our Youth Caucus is so critically important to our state legislatures, that we're at the seat at the table, quite literally, right here. And we do it in a bipartisan way. So we have representatives and senators on both sides of the aisle. We've done this now for, the third year that we've been doing it this way. We've actually been able to come together on very significant pieces of legislation that impact young people's ability to stay in our state, to live, work, and play, which is so great to see, especially in the media where you might see, the divisiveness. We can come together on things that we actually agree on and can work collaboratively together. So quickly, I want to go through introductions of all the great members of the Youth Caucus. You'll find in your packet all the bios. I know it's lengthy, but that way you get a sense of where each of them have come from, and that you can chart your own course if you want to along that pathway. So we'll start at the end. Dustin?
All right, good afternoon. I'm State Representative Dustin White. I represent 10 towns in rural Augusta County. And thank you for coming.
My name is Brian Tippingspitz. I represent part of Orono. In my second term, I serve on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. Last session, I served on Taxation and Energy, Utilities, and Technology.
And I'm Justin Schmidt. I represent House District 15, part of the City of Saco, and I'm on the Criminal Justice and Public Safety.
I'm Maddie Daughtry. I represent House District 49, which is part of Brunswick, and I am serving my second term on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee.
I'm Representative Nat Pouliot. I represent right outside the window the rainy West and North Augusta, House District 86, and I serve on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee as well.
I'm Representative Dylan Bates. I represent House District 35 in lovely Westbrook, Maine. I serve on the LPRED Committee, which stands for Labor, Commerce, Research, and Economic Development.
I'm A.J. Edgecombe, District 148. I live in Fort Fairfield. There's 9 surrounding smaller towns around it as well. And I serve on the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Ryan Bechtel. I represent District 11, which is part of Biddeford. And I also serve on LCRED, which Dylan has already laid out for us. I have to repeat that.
And I'd like to point out that AJ is the youngest member at 21, and Ryan is the second youngest at 22, which is really great to see that you can run while you're in college, and that they probably would comment on that. So we're going to jump right into it. This is an opportunity to hear from you guys what your concerns are, but really more importantly, what your questions are for us. This could be about running for office as a young person and those challenges that we face with that. Each of us have faced similar challenges that way. And then serving in the state government. What is it like serving in the state legislature, and in particular, how do we amplify the youth voice in that manner through public policy decision making? So we can jump right into it. We also have some prompt questions too that we can kind of answer for you, but I want to open it up to you guys first of what you might have.
Just, I'm not sure if you mentioned already, but just so we're not being rude, some of us have prior commitments that we be at for committees and other meetings, so if some of us scoot out, no offense, but
It's always busy up here.
It's not because of you.
Don't take offense. Don't take offense. So, who wants to start? Who has a question? Don't be shy. Everyone's looking. Okay.
I had a question about running early on, as in college as well. How would you start into office, especially if you were a college student?
Ryan, AJ?
Yeah, I'm currently a college student still. I actually, because of the lengthy campaign season and running, I'm taking online courses now, and I kind of lengthened it out. But I mean, I got started because in my district, my predecessor dropped out, and so I had been the intern for the party, 2 years prior, and canvassing and campaigning for all the representatives and senators in my district and in the area in Augusta County. So I mean, they kind of just called me up and were, hey, we need to find somebody to run. So I got my foot in the door, really becoming an intern, and that's how I started. I know that that's a really good way to start, get your foot in the door. Other than that, you're young, campaign hard, hit the doors. That's what people like to see. They like to see young faces at the doors. Knocking on doors is the biggest thing because they see you and they understand you're young and, do it while you're young. Because when you get older, it's harder to get to every door, so.
Brian, do you have anything to add about that?
That's
or-
perfect.
Or anybody else?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that I think it's important that you may, so, I mean, obviously, a lot of the universities probably are not in your home districts, and if you're thinking about running back home, try to build some bridges back home. So I went to school in DC, and I graduated in May, and I had a primary election in June, and so my bridge was, I ran for local office a couple of years before, and I was going back home for those meetings, but it gave me a bridge into local politics and maintaining a relationship with my hometown that I could say, I still cared about this community even though I was 500 miles away. So if there's any way for you to build those bridges, get involved in the community when you're home in the summer, any way that you can sort of establish yourself as someone who cares and is willing to step up to the plate, even for some of the jobs that might not be so glamorous, like a commission or a committee on a subcommittee or something of that nature.
And it could be even community service. It doesn't necessarily have to be political.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have done something like that.
I just want to go ahead, I'm still in college. My predecessor graduated law school while serving, so it's extremely possible to do both. I know during the campaign season it was really hard because any free time you had, you're spent going door to door, like Representative Benjamin said. Being young, you need to have a presence in your community to compensate for that, and not that many people really know you. So it is possible. I myself had to take winter classes during the transition semesters to make up for the fact that I'm only taking 2 classes this semester while we're in session. But going back this fall, I'll be able to do a full course load. So it is possible to be a full-time student. You just need to be flexible with when you take classes.
Anybody else on that?
I was gonna say, once you're in, you can even go back to school. I know Matt and I are thinking of going to grad school as well. So, your education is never a barrier to public service.
Great question too. Any other questions? Could be about running for office, serving in government, any bills, any topics, issues that you might have that you want to bring to us.
Sure. So, as we know, one of the most pressing issues among young people right now is paying for college. We have some colleges now that are upwards of $40,000 a year, yet we live in communities where the median income is only $30,000 a year. How do you pay for college?
Well, we have 2 co-chairs of the, what was it called, the College Affordability Commission.
Yeah, we just had a commission that wrapped up last year that was focusing on exactly that. It was the Maine Commission on College Affordability and College Completion. And it's something that Representative Pouliot and I are quite passionate about. Unfortunately, we're seeing tuitions, as you say, go up and up and up and up and up, while financial aid has stayed stagnant. What we always bring up is the Maine State Grant, which is the only state-based need. Aid is at $1,000, which is the same level it was in 1992, and that barely buys textbooks now. I think one of the major reasons that a lot of young people are getting involved in politics is because of their college experience and how much debt they're being driven into. You're always told about the American dream. You graduate from college, you have a great job, you have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. But it's a little bit hard to save for that when you're shelling out $100,000 on a college education. So we're working a lot on innovative scholarship ideas, refinancing student debt, trying to make sure that we fully fund our public institutions so that they're not going to be raising tuition. Also looking at innovative ideas, as Representative Edgecombe and Representative White said, they're both taking online classes, and how do we use that to bridge the affordability gap? So there's a lot going on there. I wish, honestly, we were doing more, and I think that's why it's so important to get young people involved. And what I love most about it is this isn't really a partisan issue. This is something that applies to all of us, and it's something that we all need to come together to really hold other politicians accountable to get something done. I mean, the federal government makes $76 billion off of student loans every year. That's
Matt, did you want to talk about your bill too, the student loan?
Yeah, there's a couple things. First of all, I do have a bill in the legislature to have basically a bond to refinance student loan debt. And the way it would work is it's proposed right now as a revenue bond, so students who graduated, completed their post-secondary education, and are now living and working in Maine would be eligible to refinance and consolidate their student loans. Because the federal government offers really attractive rates on new loans, but oftentimes those have to be supplemented with private student loans that are at higher interest rates, a lot of times in excess of 8 or 9%. And those loans are difficult to consolidate. So that's one aspect of the problem that we're trying to address via a consolidation product. The problem is that's really just a Band-Aid to the larger issue at hand, which is the actual cost of post-secondary education. And to really change that is going to require systemic changes within post-secondary education. Some of the things that in Maine, we have a really different setup with our university systems in that a lot of the control of the university system, the community college system, is with their boards, not with us at the state. So we give them a lot of money and then say, we're trusting you to do the right thing. And a lot of times they do. Like the University of Maine system has frozen tuition now for, I think, 3 or 4 years, and they're going to be freezing it again. But there's one area that they just were able to come to agreement on within the University of Maine system that they have not yet been able to come to agreement on between the university system and the community college, which is transfer of credits. And a lot of times students go to school, they complete credit-bearing courses, and then they want to switch to another school, and the other school says, sorry, we're not taking those credits. Well, to me, one of the most efficient ways we can address affordability without putting more money into the system is by allowing more freedom with transferring of credits from one institution to another. So we're really working to try to get the University of Maine system, which just recently adopted this measure, to talk better with the community college system so that people can start at the community college system, which in Maine, frankly, is virtually free. I mean, the amount of money that they give you in grants and so forth, and the tuition that is charged in the community college system. There was recently an article in the Portland Press Herald about this. It's almost at no cost. So if you can get your entry-level courses done at the community college system and transfer it to the University of Maine system, the overall cost of your education is going to be much lower, and we, the state, can have to pump an extra dollar into that, which then goes on the backs of the taxpayers and so forth. So I'm all for additional funding in education. I don't want to speak for all the representatives here, but I think we see a need in that in terms of keeping the overall tuition rate down, because if it's not subsidized, then the rate's going to go up. But we also have to make systemic changes to keep the cost down as well.
Something quickly I'll add is if anybody is looking at going to college outside the state because their program doesn't exist at a Maine institution, one of the bills that we're working to get behind is an expansion of the Opportunity Maine tax credit. So right now we're incentivizing you to stay in the state of Maine to live, work, and play. If you stay in Maine, you go to school here, and you work here after to pay down your student loans. The problem is if your program doesn't exist here, but you stay in New England, we're incentivizing you to leave through the Nebbing program, but not incentivizing you to come back because we want you back. We like you, right? So we want you to stay. And so the Opportunity Maine program expansion wouldn't cost a lot, and it's something that a lot of us do support. And it is one of the many bills we're trying to back.
Yeah, and on that, I filed my taxes this year. I'm self-employed as a realtor. And my accountant said, sorry, but you can't take the Opportunity Maine tax credit. I'm like, what? She's like, because you're self-employed, it doesn't apply until 2015. So for this year, I'll be able to take it, but there's no retroactivity to that. And, again, that's just another area where we're penalizing people for, having an entrepreneurial spirit and working for themselves. So fortunately, that will change, but there's definitely problems, even within programs we already have, without creating something new that need to be fixed.
And joining the panel is Representative Henry Beck. You want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, my name is Henry Beck. I represent part of Waterville and part of Oakland in the House, along with these other House members. And I've been here since 2008. I was 22 at the time, so I was the baby of the family then, but I'm no longer even close to
The senior member of the Youth Caucus. Yes. And you're chair of?
the Insurance and Financial Services. I know Mr. Jones is a voice there along, is that right?
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
Great. Great question on education. Any other questions? Anything at all?
The Maine people voted for 55% of our budget to go towards education, and currently 55% isn't going towards education. What is the legislation doing right now to try to promote 55% going towards education?
wants to go first?
Employee of the committee, I think.
So here's what I'll say about that. I think that you find support across the board for funding our education system in the state of Maine at a higher level. However, there's other parts of state government that are absolutely cannibalizing the funding that we have available that could otherwise go into education, mainly Department of Health and Human Services and Maine Care, Medicaid, and so forth. So while I've actually been a supporter of some of the expansion of some of those programs, I think it's important to put on the table the fact that there's other parts of state government, and this isn't unique to Maine. This is something that's occurring across the United States, where other parts of government are eating up the dollars that used to go into education. And if you look at the historic trend of expansion of these programs, the dollars going toward them and the diminishing amount of money going into education, they follow each other very closely. It's a difficult conversation to have because you end up picking winners and losers, and that's not what any of us want to do. I mean, we have to take care of our aging population. There's no, I don't think there's any disagreement about that. But we have to do it in a more efficient way so that we can free up dollars that can go into education. Otherwise, it means increasing taxes, which none of us want and can afford to do.
I think the other problem is when the referendum was passed in 2001, I wasn't defined what's included in the 55%. This is something that we struggle with all the time in the education committee. Does it include facilities? Does it include unallocated debt? Does it include teacher benefits? And this is something that legislatures have struggled with since the referendum was passed. And I think each year there's a discussion about whether retirement's included in those aspects. So some people argue if you include that, we're at that funding level. But the problem is, I think the heart of the legislation was people imagining 55% of the money that goes directly into classroom instruction, to teachers, to students, and to those type of materials. And at the end of the day, the problem is, we don't have enough revenue. As a state, we're not talking about innovating our tax code so it's no longer regressive and so that we're actually being able to pay for the programs we want to see and being able to fund our future. I mean, we all agree that education is the best investment we can make as a state next to infrastructure. And I would argue education helps infrastructure.
And I'll just add briefly on that is right now we're breaking the law. This was a mandate from the people to the State House. And we don't question election results of our governor. We don't question our own election results. But yet, when the people say, do something, we should listen. And so that's something that we're having to grapple with because as Maddie mentioned, it's like, how do you define that? But it is something that we take very seriously because it was a mandate to us to do something. So, any other questions? Education, it could be anything that's ever wanted to know.
I hate to back out, but I do have to get running to committee. But thank you guys all for coming and sharing the few questions that I've heard. And hopefully, if you have any more, they'll be able to answer them all for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I gotta get running to cheers, please.
Everyone's booking.
Well, one which I'll make, because there's young women in the audience, is we need more young women to run. As you can see, I'm the only young woman up here. Myself and Representative Herbig are pretty much the only two young women in the legislature. We used to have more. And a lot of women don't run until they're asked. There's actually statistics that say women don't think about running until they've been asked 6 times. They think about being a staffer, they think about being an advocate, instead of realizing that they can run. So whenever I'm at one of these events, I always ask the young women in the audience to seriously consider running for office. We need gender equity. We're 50% of the population, and we're nowhere near close of women being 50% elected positions in this country. We're actually below Rwanda in our number of elected women, so I always like to throw that fact out. Here in the State House, I think we have about 32% of the legislature between the House and the Senate are women, and that's, we need to do something about that, so you should think about it.
Any other questions? Colin? Andy? Oh, yep.
Yeah, I have a question about legislation. So this is something that I want to learn more about, and so forgive me if I say something that isn't quite right, or yeah. Okay, so the new sort of education format that's becoming more popular is the standards-based grading system. So I'm just curious, because I've had a very biased sort of explanation of that, and I'm just wondering, what are the actual benefits of that?
So in Maine, we have a very high graduation rate, but we have a very low proficiency rate in terms of students who are graduating from high school. They're actually proficient in the material. And I can speak to that personally. When I graduated from high school, I went to Coney here in Augusta. I decided I wanted to go to the University of Maine in Augusta, literally like 2 miles from my house. Because that's where my girlfriend at the time was going, and I figured I should probably go to college, because it was the right thing to do. And so I enrolled at the University of Maine in Augusta, and had to take 3 remedial math classes in order to even be able to get admitted into the entry-level math class at the university. And I think that says something about the current structure that we have in secondary education in Maine. Not that we have bad teachers or that we have bad anything. I don't like to really point out somebody as not doing something the right way. It's just that we do have a system that in part is social promotion. So we're saying, John's 18, he's passed the majority of his classes, we're going to give him a diploma. Not, does John actually know the material that we taught him over the course of studying for all the years? And what Maine is undergoing right now is a transition into proficiency-based learning where there are standards, and Maine has had standards for 20 years. So there's a common misconception that Common Core standards or state standards is something new. It's not. We passed the Maine learning results in 1997, so we've had standards for almost 20 years now. But now they're being called something different, and they're aligned with the rest of the country. 43 states that have adopted this, because we realize that children move in their educational journey. They may start in California and move to Maine, and it's important that throughout their educational experience, they're being held to the same standard. Because if state A has a lower standard than state B, then when the child moves, it's difficult for them to make sure they're on the same playing field. And when a kid gets to the end of their educational journey, they're going to have to be proficient in material in order to graduate, not just say, well, we think it's a good idea to graduate them, so that's what we're going to do, which is why we have a 44% proficiency rate in the state. In my opinion, we should have a 44% graduation rate, but we don't. It's in the 80s. So this is a big change, really, in terms of graduating students based on proficiency, and it's very controversial, because what do you do with a kid that normally would have given a diploma to that now is not able to demonstrate proficiency? That's a really serious philosophical discussion we have to have about what are we going to do with these kids that really don't know the material, and now they should be graduating.
I think another issue is that when the bill was passed, we weren't in the legislature, Henry, you were here for proficiency-based diplomas, is that the bill that was passed didn't have caveats for students on different learning planes. So if you are a student with a learning disability, what does proficiency mean to you? Are you held to the same standards? So that's one of those things that we're grappling with right now, is how does that apply? Because for some individuals, they'll be able to graduate being highly proficient in math, but 2 years of proficiency in a foreign language, one, depending on the student, might not be possible, or depending on the school, their offerings also might not be possible. But it is a hot topic right now, and it's kind of hard, I think, being painted as this evil next movement when it really came from a place of policymakers and teachers and parents and students wanting to have the type of schooling that nationwide, wherever you graduated, you'd be ready not only for the workforce, but just to be a highly qualified citizen, that you'd be able to take a quantitative approach, be able to have strong financial literacy, be able to read and write. And one of the things we've seen is we're actually delaying the proficiency-based implementation date because there's been so much commotion that one district might be really far ahead, another one might be behind, and we need more support from the state. It's hard when you pass a mandate like this, which really comes from a place, a well-meaning place, but you don't have the support on the state level. It's leaving some districts sort of lost. So we've seen districts where teachers and parents and students have come in and testified and have raved about the program, had a great experience. And then we've seen other areas where it really hasn't been working. So that's, it's not a simple question, but I think the heart of the bill really is well-meaning.
Great question.
I hope that answers your question.
Anything else? I know everyone's excited to ask.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So with the budget debate kind of raging outside of the Youth Caucus, has the Youth Caucus talked about its priorities within the fiscal year's budget, and has it tried to advocate for anything as a caucus?
Yeah, so right now, and I'll let Dylan say he's ready to respond.
I'm
So
so
I'll
ready.
let you go to it. There we
No,
go.
well, I now watch me misstep. But no, basically, in terms of, I'll start with the advocacy part first because it's larger than just the fiscal unit. Obviously, I don't believe we have any members on the appropriations committee, but we do, since everything is kind of vetted through them in a financial sense, we do pick issues, going back to the thrust of the Youth Caucus, that we can advocate for, and in so doing, sort of prioritize those issues. So when, for instance, I delivered testimony on our behalf recently in front of the Criminal Justice Committee, we will do that for a number of different bills in front of different committees in order to kind of show or put our seal of approval on something. And then there's just a matter of the intra-legislative conversations and really saying, hey, this is a priority for us. This is a really big issue for young people. And I think the biggest thing we can do in terms of the appropriations element is just our social consciousness of it and really trying to keep it ever present in everyone's mind. And this is important. I mean, it's a big priority for the entire legislature to try and keep young people in the state right now. And I think we feel like who better to design those initiatives or push those initiatives than us. So to answer your question, we don't directly have an impact on the budget, but we certainly discuss what our priorities are with and without relation to the budget.
And the way for us, how it works, since we have members of all different parties and different political backings, is that we have a group discussion. A lot of it's done online, and we sort of talk about which bills. And for the budget, it's a fascinating discussion. I think for all of us, the biggest deal is, as Dylan said, anything that helps keep young students and Mainers in Maine. So making sure that you're funding for college mobility, that we're funding your schools, that if you want to start your own business, that you have the broadband infrastructure. So that's sort of the larger umbrella that we're focusing on.
Certainly concerned about flatlining the community college system. Yes. I think that's a concern. I think just thinking about 50,000 feet, the budget, if the budget makes sense and the economy can do well, that will keep people here rather than a specific initiative. There are good jobs, good economy, people will stay here, regardless of their age.
And in order for us to support a bill or endorse something, we all really need to come together on it.
It's a majority.
Right, a majority. So we want to make sure what we're actually backing is something that we can all agree on. And so we don't take that lightly, and we do have some very sensitive conversations sometimes, and sometimes we abandon different bills that might fit within our guidelines if the majority can't find consensus. And so that's what we're trying to do.
It's a really great, the best thing about everyone who's been involved is it's a great place to bounce off ideas. It's sort of a safe space to argue about policy elements and what should go forward.
Any other questions? Go on.
Thank you all for coming.
This is not an option.
Thank you all so very, very much.
I should also mention, since we heard a lot about the Young Democratic Organizations, there's also the Young Republicans group, which is Gen 2 of Senate.
But you should all join.
And feel free to